The day I taped a crooked cardboard sign above the mailboxes, I didn't plan to become the shelf guy. It was a Tuesday in Chicago, gray and damp, the kind of late spring day that smells like the train tracks after rain. I was carrying a small lamp that never looked right in my living room. On a whim, I set the lamp on an empty delivery cart next to the wall, tore a flap off a package box, and wrote, "Free. Take a thing, leave a thing." I used blue painter's tape from my pocket, because of course I had painter's tape in my pocket, and took a step back. The sign slumped. The lamp tilted. My stomach did the same. I told myself I would check back in an hour, rescue my lamp, and pretend this burst of community spirit had never happened. When I returned from coffee, the lamp was gone, and in its place sat a jar of marbles, a book of Chicago murals, and a small ceramic elephant with a chipped ear. Someone had added a second note, neater than mine. "Love this idea." I stood there smiling like I'd just won a raffle for a laundry basket. People shuffled through for packages and slowed down at the cart. A guy in a Blackhawks hoodie picked up the elephant, shrugged, and set it back. The elevator chimed. The building felt a little less like a stack of strangers and more like a place where something could happen, even if that something was just a jar of blue marbles. I dragged a low shelf from my storage unit to replace the cart. It used to hold my college textbooks. Now it held odd little stories. A whisk with a bent handle. A stack of postcards of the Chicago River dyed green. A scarf the color of a summer sky. That scarf would turn out to be important, though I didn't know it yet. I straightened things when I passed by, like a shopkeeper with nothing to sell. On Wednesday, I left a bundle of extra command hooks. On Thursday, someone added a bag of tea labeled peppermint. Still good. I laughed because it sounded like a plea. On Friday evening, I met Mr. Alvarez, who lived on the third floor and fixed bicycles in our alley on weekends. He eyed the shelf like it was a suspicious engine. "You start this?" he asked. I admitted I had. He pinched the scarf. "My granddaughter might like this." He studied me for a second, then nodded once, as if I'd passed a small test. He took the scarf and left a tiny wrench in its place, the kind that seems useless until it saves your Saturday. By the end of the first week, the shelf was a slow river. Things came, things went. I saw a neighbor pick up the book of murals, then noticed it back 2 days later, with a sticky note inside a page. "Try the one on 18th Street. Trust me." Another neighbor added a bag of cat toys with a little drawing of whiskers. Someone else left a box of light bulbs. I found reasons to walk past the mailroom more than I needed to. It wasn't just curiosity. It was the feeling that I could stand there and watch kindness change shape. On Sunday morning, the scarf came back. I found it folded neatly, a note pinned to the fringe. "Thank you. Borrowed for a photo. Naomi." I had seen Naomi in the hallway before. She was a nurse. I'd learned in the elevator, because of the shoes and the badge and the way she leaned against the wall between floors like she cherished those seconds. The scarf seemed different now, like it had a story stitched to it. I wondered what kind of photo needed sky blue fringe. That afternoon, a kid I'd seen racing scooters in the courtyard stopped at the shelf. He had a gap-toothed smile and a dinosaur t-shirt. He picked up the jar of marbles and rolled one in his palm, like he was choosing a planet. "Miles," said the woman behind him, his mom. "We only take one." He chose a single marble, deep blue with a white swirl, and put the jar back. Then he studied the chipped elephant, considered his options like a tiny economist, and left a matchbox car he'd pulled from his pocket. "Trade," he announced. He drove the car in one circle on the shelf, then nudged it exactly into place. That night, as the brown line trains hummed in the distance, I sat on my couch and tried to name the feeling I had. It was a mix of pride and something softer, like the relief you get when the bus you thought you missed pulls up anyway. I thought about my week, answering emails, microwaving pasta, walking around puddles. None of it would be in a movie. This new thing might not, either. Still, it made me look at my neighbors differently. We had always been a collection of door clicks and shoe sounds. The shelf added a small, shared sentence to our building, and it said, "I was here, and I thought of you." Monday morning, I left a pack of sticky notes and a pen. For messages, I wrote. By noon, the edge of the shelf looked like the side of a refrigerator. "Whoever left the whisk, you saved my pancake Saturday." If you like jazz, the radio station on 90.9 is great at night. Free plant clippings coming soon. ZZ Plant that never dies. The notes were written in different hands, some neat, some like little storms. There was something disarming about it. Adults writing to each other on tiny squares, half anonymous, fully sincere. In the days after, the shelf began to teach me small lessons. People don't need a perfect reason to be kind. People like to borrow the sky and return it with a thank you pin. People will fix your drawer if you leave a note next to a bag of loose screws. I learned that peppermint tea can make a stranger's week, that a light bulb is a love letter when your kitchen goes dark, and that marbles matter deeply when you are 6 and the sky looks like glass. I learned that I was less shy than I suspected. Every time I straightened the sticky notes, I felt like I was adjusting a mirror and seeing us a little clearer. On Thursday, I found a fresh problem. A pair of muddy boots. They were heavy, wet, and they had been placed on top of the messages, flattening ZZ Plant that never dies. I stood there with the boots in my hands, trying to decide between frustration and understanding. Maybe someone had needed to shed winter, even though it wasn't winter, not anymore. I moved the boots to the bottom of the shelf and put a sticky note up top. "Cleanish things only, please." It felt bossy. But the next morning, the boots were gone, and someone had left a towel and a note. "Sorry about the mess." I felt something lift, like the sound a kite makes when it catches. A week later, the scarf vanished again. It disappeared as a storm rolled across the city, low and dark, the kind of sky that turns afternoon to evening. The elevator doors opened and closed on a rhythm, people making last-minute runs for takeout before the rain. I told myself to relax. Things came, things went. Still, the shelf felt lighter, like a missing tooth you can't stop touching with your tongue. I stuck a small sticky note on the corner. "Sky Scarf, are you out there?" I didn't sign it, but my handwriting gave me away to anyone who'd been watching. I had become the shelf guy, after all. That night the wind snapped against my windows. I wondered about Naomi and her long shifts. I wondered about Mr. Alvarez and his granddaughter. I wondered about Miles and his marble, whether he was rolling it under his bed, building constellations on the floor with his hands. It seemed silly, worrying about a scarf. But the shelf had become a thin, bright line across my week, and I didn't want the line to fray. I promised myself I'd stop by early in the morning, before work, and check on things. I slept lightly, as if the building needed me to keep listening for something small. I beat the coffee shop's first yawn and walked to the mailroom with a bag of bagels and a roll of tape. The shelf had grown a personality overnight. Someone had left a Polaroid photo of the shelf itself, as if documenting a shy animal. The blue scarf was still missing, but the photo made me laugh. Under it, a new note. "If you take the last of something, leave a sticker, or a joke, or a recipe." A box of stickers appeared beside the pen. I added a bagel to the top shelf with a post-it, plain. "Please save me from myself." By the time I checked back at lunch, the bagel was gone, and a recipe had replaced it. Naomi's end-of-shift pasta, with garlic, butter, a squeeze of lemon, and crushed red pepper. Some notes carry relief right in the ink. Over the next few days, the shelf turned into a bulletin board for tiny joys. People clipped a few sprigs off the promised ZZ plant and taped photos of the sprig's progress. "Mr. Alvarez left a stack of patches shaped like lightning bolts and wrote, "For jackets, or to feel fast." I took one and ironed it onto my backpack. A woman from the sixth floor left a half-used roll of painter's tape with a note, borrowed from a guy on the second floor. Returning with interest. I smiled and tapped my pocket, suddenly aware of my own reputation. Then, one evening, a building manager I had never seen before appeared, all keys and policies. She stood in front of the shelf with the stance of a person who has seen spills. "This is not an official building amenity," she said, like she was reading from a manual. My stomach did the slow elevator drop. I explained, as gently as I could, that it was neighborly, that it stayed tidy, that it had saved at least one pancake Saturday. She listened without interrupting, which seemed promising. She picked up the jar of marbles, turned it in her hands, and put it down like a careful verdict. "I'll talk to the property owner," she said. "If it stays, it needs rules." Rules. The word made me feel 12 again and caught with a contraband yo-yo. That night, I drafted a short list on a sheet of printer paper. Keep it clean. No food unless sealed. Take only what you need. Leave something kind. I printed it in large letters and taped it above the shelf. It was less fun than the sticky notes, but it looked grown-up in a helpful way. I added a line at the bottom. "We'll host a tidy up on the first Saturday of the month." I didn't know who we were yet, but it felt true in my mouth. The first Saturday arrived with bright light, the blue kind that makes Wicker Park look like a postcard. I showed up with trash bags and a box of wipes. I expected to tidy alone, maybe with a podcast. Instead, 3 neighbors arrived. Naomi in scrubs with a book of recipes to swap. Mr. Alvarez with a small tool kit he insisted we might need. And Miles with a plastic dinosaur who would supervise. We cleaned. We straightened. We made a lost and found corner with a little basket. Naomi found a button shaped like a cloud and pinned it to the rule sheet. The sky scarf remained missing, and I tried not to look for it like a lost friend. After we wiped the last shelf, Naomi glanced at me. "You started something," she said, serious and light at once. I felt my ears warm. "Mr. Alvarez nodded. He did. I made a joke about being Chicago's most famous shelf manager, and they laughed in a way that made my shoulders drop. For a moment, the 4 of us were just people with lint on our fingers and a reason to know each other's names. 2 weeks later, the building manager returned, but this time she wasn't alone. The property owner came with her, a quiet man in a navy sweater. He looked at the rules, at the sticky notes, at the Polaroid, at the jar of marbles that was somehow always 3/4 full. He picked up a light bulb and squinted, like he could see the building's future in the filament. "Keep it tidy," he said. "No liability for us." Then he added, almost shyly, "I'll leave some extra paint rollers next time I'm here." The manager gave a tiny nod that felt like an apology for the imagined spills. The shelf exhaled. So did I. That weekend, something new arrived, a little map. It was drawn on printer paper with a thin black pen. It showed our block, the bus stop, the tiny park with the stubborn swings, the corner deli that sells peaches that taste like July even in June. On the edges, the artist had written notes. Best light at 7:30 p.m. Dog that looks like a tiny lion. Tree with a heart carved low. There was no signature, but the handwriting felt familiar. I traced the streets with my finger. The map made the neighborhood feel like a story you could walk. The next morning, an envelope appeared with my name on it. Inside was a copy of the Polaroid of the shelf, and behind it, a second photo. A woman on a bridge by the river, wearing the sky blue scarf, laughing into the wind, the city a blur behind her. On the back, "Thanks for letting me borrow the sky. Naomi." I sat on the bench under the mailboxes and held the photo in both hands. The scarf wasn't mine. The shelf wasn't mine. But for a minute, it felt like we all owned the same bright corner of the day. In July, the city pressed its warm hand to everything. The building smelled like laundry and sunscreen. The shelf kept moving. Someone left a stack of old CDs with a note. If you still have a car that plays these, enjoy. Someone else added a basket of free herbs from a windowsill garden. Basil, mint, chives tied with string. I left a pair of sunglasses I never wore and took a sprig of mint that made my kitchen smell like a fresh start. Once, late at night, I crossed the lobby and found a couple slow dancing in front of the shelf to a song only they could hear. I looked away. Some moments deserve to stay uncollected. By mid-August, the manager stopped checking. The shelf finally felt like furniture, the way the lobby couch felt like a necessary place to wait. And then, late on a Sunday, the sky broke in a summer downpour, the kind that chews gutters and presses cars into the curb. The power flickered, then went out. Our building, the block, maybe the neighborhood. For a few quiet minutes, I stood at my window and listened to the rain pretend it owned the whole world. Somewhere in the dark, a voice laughed. It could have been Miles. I found my flashlight, pointed it at the ceiling, and made the room a tiny lantern. That was when I thought of the shelf, alone downstairs, and wondered if it was glowing too. When the lights snapped off, our building made a sound I'd never heard, like a low inhale held too long. My phone lit up with a message from the city. Estimated restoration 3 hours. 3 hours is easy in sunlight. In a summer storm after sunset, 3 hours is a season. I grabbed my flashlight and the extra one I keep for no reason, and I hustled down the stairs, skipping every second squeaky step I know by heart. The lobby was black in that heavy way where corners grow teeth. I swept my light across the mailboxes and toward the shelf. There it was, a small island. The jar of marbles caught my beam and scattered it into tiny seas. The rule sheet's cloud button flashed silver. A box of tea glowed in a soft green. And in the middle of the lower shelf lay something new. 3 thick candles and a note. In case the night needs help. I laughed quietly in an empty room. I lit a candle and set it on the top shelf, then put the other 2 nearby. The flame gave the mailroom a storybook color, all honey and shadows. The elevator chimed, then sighed, and opened to darkness. Footsteps gathered. People stepped into the warm circle like campers arriving at a fire. Naomi came down the stairs with a flashlight strapped to her head like a miner. Mr. Alvarez arrived carrying a small cooler. The building manager appeared with a stack of bottled water and an apologetic shrug. Miles bounded in with a cape made from a towel and declared himself chief light officer. The jar of marbles hummed with color. For a minute we all stood with that shy energy strangers have when they're about to become a team. Then the shelf told us what to do. Naomi took charge of the tea. Mr. Alvarez opened the cooler. Ice, a few sodas, a bag of popsicles he had grabbed for emergencies. The manager passed out waters. I pulled a string of battery lights from a box someone had left the week before. We taped them to the top shelf and watched them blink awake like a patient animal. Someone set a wireless speaker on the second shelf and tuned it to 99. Jazz filled the small, bright room. We made a plan without naming it. Older neighbors who didn't love the stairs got the first chairs. Families clustered on the carpet. People took turns heading up to check on pets and grab extra flashlights. We built a little world out of borrowed things. It wasn't heroic. It was better. It was ordinary courage, the kind that shows up with a towel cape and a jar of peppermint tea. I felt a swell in my chest that might have been pride or relief or both. At some point, a rumor moved through the room like a quiet wave. A down branch on the next block, a line hugging the wet street, a crew on the way. We didn't have details, but the details didn't matter in that small circle of light. Naomi sat beside me for a minute with a popsicle strawberry red. You did this, she said, nodding at the glow. I said the shelf did it, and immediately felt corny. She didn't laugh at me. She rested her shoulder against the mailboxes and closed her eyes for one slow breath. And for a second I thought about that photo on the bridge and how the scarf looked like a piece of sky deciding to be warm. Miles set up a trade station next to the rule sheet. If you took a popsicle, you gave a sticker. If you drank a water, you told a joke. He enforced the rules with the gravity of a tiny judge. A neighbor from the fourth floor, who I had only ever seen in running gear, told a story about getting locked out in socks and being rescued by the mail carrier. Laughter rolled across the room, easy and light. The building, which some days sounded like a mouth full of coins, now sounded like a porch. Around 9, a man I didn't know dropped a folded map on the shelf. The same thin black pen, the same notes in the margins. Best view of Lightning, corner of Western and the bridge. Puddles good for jumping by the deli. The mapmaker, it seemed, had joined us. He stood back from the circle, hands in pockets, a small smile on his face. I hoped he could see we were living inside one of his drawings, the one where a group of dots becomes a line. Right before 10, the lights returned. The room made that soft gasp again. Only this time it was laughter and a few gentle groans. The jazz sounded thinner under the fluorescent brightness. We blinked and blinked, like we just walked out of a matinee. People clapped once, because that's what you do when a magic trick is over and you're grateful the rabbit is fine. Naomi blew out the candles. Smoke curled into the air like handwriting. Mr. Alvarez packed up the cooler and shook my hand. Good shelf, he said, which felt like the highest praise. As the lobby thinned and the elevator started working hard again, the building manager lingered. She looked at the rule sheet, the Polaroid, the map, the jar of marbles now a little less full. I was wrong to worry, she said, which in manager language sounded like an edible bouquet. We should get a proper table. I promised to measure the space. She smiled in a way that suggested peace treaties and new beginnings. I stayed to tidy. I straightened the notes, put the tea back, coiled the battery lights, collected popsicle sticks. On the bottom shelf, something caught my eye. The sky blue scarf, folded, a tiny safety pin through one corner like a quiet flag. No note. No fanfare. I picked it up and felt the soft weight of everything that had happened because a stranger had trusted a city to be kind. I set the scarf on the top shelf with the Polaroid, a small museum of our night. Upstairs, my apartment smelled like rain and mint. I sat on the floor and let the quiet come back. I thought about how none of this would have happened if I hadn't had a lamp that didn't fit my living room. It made me laugh. I thought about my life before the shelf, how I knew only footsteps and elevator timing, and my life after, where I knew Naomi's pasta recipe and Mr. Alvarez's favorite patch shape and the sound of Miles declaring a trade. I felt something land inside me, like a bird choosing a fence. In the weeks after the storm, the shelf changed again. People left things that felt more like invitations than objects. A folded flyer for a Saturday morning porch coffee on the steps outside. A sign-up sheet for a neighborhood pickup basketball game at the tiny park with the stubborn swings. A list of places to watch the sunset if you like trains, which I knew was mine even before I saw my own handwriting. The shelf had stopped being a box of stuff and become a small stage where our quiet selves stepped out and waved. September softened the heat. School buses returned to the streets like faithful ships. One evening, I came home and found an envelope with my name. Inside was a laminated copy of the rules, the cloud button replaced by a printed cloud, and below it, "This shelf belongs to everyone. Thanks to the guy who believed we would show up." No signature. I knew who had fixed the words. Manager Neatness, gentle now, but I also knew the sentence had many hands. Maybe all of ours. On a Sunday, We held our first shelf picnic on the rooftop. It wasn't fancy. A trail of sticky notes pointed from the elevator to the stairs, each one with a drawing of the shelf's little artifacts: a marble, a whisk, a lightning bolt patch. People brought what they could. Naomi brought pasta, of course. Mr. Alvarez grilled hot dogs and told stories about bikes that escaped and returned. Miles, now missing his front tooth, set up a trade blanket where you could swap a joke for a cookie. The city glowed in the late light, the river catching fire where it bent. At the picnic's messy center, I realized the best part of the shelf wasn't the things. It was the way the shelf slowed us down long enough to notice we lived together. In a city that can make you feel like you're always rushing past the best part of the song, the shelf changed the tempo. We had made a rhythm you could keep with your fingertips. The thought surprised me and then fit, like the right key in the right lock. As the sun tipped behind the skyline, someone played a song soft enough to let our own noise win. Naomi stood at the railing with the scarf looped loose around her neck, not because of the temperature. It was still warm, but because some objects become more than themselves. I stood near the table of cookies and watched our building do the opposite of disappearing. It sharpened. It felt like a kind of translation, where everyday life gets turned into lines you can read out loud. Before the night ended, I stuck one more sticky note on the elevator door. It was small, and I wrote carefully so it would be easy to read. "Thanks for showing up," it said. "See you by the shelf." Then I took the stairwell back down, slower than usual, listening for the quiet new sounds you only notice when you know what they mean. A laugh turning the corner, a bag of tea being opened, a marble settling back into its jar like a planet finding home.